On June 22, 1941, Adolf Hitler launched the largest invasion in military history, Operation Barbarossa. Over 3 million Axis troops surged across a 1,800-mile front into the Soviet Union. Hitler believed it would take just a few months to destroy the Red Army. Instead, it became the turning point of World War II. This was Hitler's greatest gamble, and it cost him everything. Hitler's obsession with Lebensraum, living space for the German people, drove his decision to invade the USSR. He believed communism was a Jewish conspiracy and that the Soviet Union would collapse quickly. Operation Barbarossa was divided into 3 army groups. Army Group North, led by Field Marshal Lieb, was to move toward Leningrad. Army Group Center, under Field Marshal Bock, would head to Moscow. Army Group South, commanded by Field Marshal Rundstedt, targeted Ukraine. The Germans committed over 3 million troops, 3,350 tanks, and nearly 2,800 aircraft. The Soviets had larger numbers, but were poorly organized after Stalin's brutal purges. The invasion began with devastating success. The Luftwaffe destroyed over 1,800 Soviet aircraft in the first 2 days. German panzer divisions raced forward, encircling huge Soviet formations. At Bialystok and Minsk, over 300,000 Soviet troops were captured. Smolensk followed, with another 200,000 taken. By September, Army Group South had taken Kyiv in a massive encirclement that netted over 600,000 prisoners. Hitler declared the Soviet Union already broken. But the Red Army refused to die. New divisions appeared. Soviet morale held firm, and Soviet industry, far from the front, began relocating east of the Urals. As autumn approached, Hitler made critical, strategic mistakes. He diverted Army Group Center away from Moscow to support operations in Ukraine and Leningrad. This delay proved fatal. By the time the Germans resumed their push toward Moscow in October, the Rasputitsa, the autumn mud season, had set in. Vehicles bogged down. Supply lines collapsed. When Operation Typhoon, the final drive for Moscow, began, Soviet defenses had hardened. Reinforcements from Siberia, released after Japan decided not to attack the USSR, arrived just in time. In December, Soviet forces launched a counter-offensive, pushing the Germans back from the gates of Moscow. Hitler was furious but refused to allow a retreat, leading to massive casualties. Operation Barbarossa failed to achieve its main goals. Leningrad held out under siege. Moscow stood defiant. The Red Army was battered but not broken. German casualties by the end of 1941 exceeded 775,000. Over 20,000 tanks and aircraft had been lost. Soviet losses were even more catastrophic. Over 3 million soldiers captured, more than 4 million killed or wounded, and thousands of villages destroyed. But Germany had underestimated the resilience of the Soviet people and the brutal Russian winter. Hitler had turned a war of blitzkrieg into a war of attrition, and that was a war he could not win. Operation Barbarossa was Hitler's greatest gamble and his greatest mistake. It opened up a 2-front war he could never sustain. It shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility, and it laid the groundwork for Germany's eventual defeat. In trying to conquer the Soviet Union, Hitler overreached. In doing so, he sealed his own fate. Understanding the scale and failure of Operation Barbarossa helps us grasp the true turning point of World War II. One man's gamble became a global catastrophe, and from the snows of Russia, the tide of history began to turn against the Third Reich. If you have enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more summaries of the key turning points of the Second World War.